Does ministry feel like trying to ride a bull without a cowboy hat while wearing flip-flops?
What just happened?
I know that's quite a word picture, but maybe that resonates. Because every week you're reminded of all the things that need to be done still. All the leaders that need to be developed, all the sermons and studies that still need to be prepared, all the people who are in your community who are lost, who need Jesus, and all the people who are in your church who are hurting and desperately need help. And that doesn't even mention the fact that you have another board meeting you got to prepare for, another event that you need to plan, another ministry you need to start, and a staff team that needs to be coached. In this video, I want to help you focus on the most important things because many pastors drift, and I don't want that to be you. In this video, I'm going to share with you 10 habits of highly intentional pastors so you can lead a healthy church without choking your soul. And hey, if we haven't met yet, my name's Brandon, and this is Preach and Lead. This is the channel where I help pastors like you preach memorable, faithful sermons and lead the church intentionally. And as my way of saying thanks to you for being on this video, I've got a great free resource for you that will be a great companion for what we talk about in this video. It's called the Intentional Pastor's Roadmap. It's a checklist that will help you lead with greater clarity and direction because let's face it, 80 to 85% of churches are declining or plateauing. And I believe the main reason for that is leadership or a lack thereof. Too many pastors and too many churches are leading Sunday to Sunday. They're not leading with a greater time horizon in mind. And many pastors are leading really on their own. They don't have a leadership team that is really pulling their weight. So in this Intentional Pastor's Roadmap, I'm going to give you the path, the roadmap to leading more intentionally and empowering the people around you. So go to preachandlead.com/roadmap to get your Intentional Pastor's Roadmap so you can lead with greater clarity and direction. Now let's jump into the 10 habits of highly intentional pastors. The first habit of highly intentional pastors is that they invest in their own walk with God. Intentional pastors know that the level of their effectiveness is dependent upon the level of their intimacy with the Lord. They're hungry to grow. They're curious when it comes to the scriptures. They're in tune with the Spirit of God. And yes, there's going to be dry seasons, but they know that that's just going to be a season. They've got to push through it, and they do. They've got testimony after testimony of walking with the Lord and the Lord showing himself to be faithful to them. An intentional pastor invests in their own walk with God. Number 2, a highly intentional pastor prioritizes making disciples. They take seriously the call Jesus gave his disciples before he ascended to the throne room in heaven, when he said, "Go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded of you, and surely I will be with you to the end of the age." Intentional pastors take that seriously. That is, to them, their first line of job description. They are called to make disciples who then go and make disciples. For them, it's not a theory, it's a practice. It's a lifestyle. It's not just a good idea or we'll get to that someday when. It's the first mandate. It's the thing they're called to do as they love God and love people. And so their sermons, they have that tenor. They have that breadth to them. They have that depth to them, that call to action to go and make disciples. Not just invite people to church, but hey, you have a mandate. Talking to their congregation, you have a mandate to go and make disciples, and they equip them on how to do that. They might have classes on how to have a conversation with someone about Jesus, how to pray for someone, how to lead a Bible study, how to lead a disciple-making group. And they themselves are making disciples. They're prioritizing a few, so that those few, after spending a year or two with that intentional pastor, they can go and do the same thing with people in their spheres of influence. Making disciples is a priority to intentional pastors. Number 3, an intentional pastor invests in their leadership team. They know that they're only going to be as strong as their team is strong. And so they invest both relationally and in an equipping way to help their leaders know where we're going, what we're called to do, who we're called to be, helping them grow in their gifts. And then when it comes time that they need help, an intentional pastor asks for help. They put a team around them who complements their gifts and shares the load. An intentional pastor invests in their leadership team. The fourth habit of a highly intentional pastor is that they coach their staff team. Intentional pastors don't allow their staff members to operate in silos. This plagues too many churches. But instead, an intentional pastor meets one-on-one with their staff team and meets with them as a group to make sure that they're aligned, to make sure that they're equipped, to make sure that they're caring for their soul, to make sure that they themselves are equipping people underneath them to go out and do the work of ministry. After all, that's what Ephesians 4 tells us to do, right? And instead of face-to-face time with their staff, focusing on coaching them as a rare occasion, they do this consistently. Number 5, an intentional pastor optimizes their work week around time management and energy management. It's one thing to manage your time by making sure you've got 3 big goals for the week and 3 big ideas and goals for each day, and making sure that you're making progress on each of those to day block and time block. Those are all really important things and the basics of productivity. But also, intentional pastors know that they have limited energy, so that they make sure that they're spending their best energy on their most important work. The 6th habit of a highly intentional pastor is they keep their church aligned around the church's vision. Intentional pastors know that in order to create alignment, they've got to talk about their church's vision often and from different angles. They've got to talk about it in sermons and meetings and one-on-one times as they're weaving in different stories on social media. Intentional pastors know that they've got to create alignment, and alignment at the end of the day is one of the chief responsibilities of a leader. They have to develop within themselves a filter to see everything through the church's vision. A new ministry, does it fit the vision? A new initiative, does it fit the vision? This opportunity, does it fit the vision? This sermon series, does it fit the vision? What are we called to do? What is God calling us to do here in the short term? And how are we going to protect that and guide ourselves, guide our team, guide our people toward that thing? And then as they go, they make sure that their team is aligned in the vision and the way they are talking about it and the way they are thinking about it. This can simply be done by asking the question, hey, what are we headed toward? What are we trying to accomplish? And then checking to see if they are aligned with the vision. Number 7, protect the church from busyness. Intentional pastors protect the church from busyness. There's a lot of things a church could do. There's a lot of different initiatives. There's a lot of different events. There's a lot of different strategies that a church could do. And in my experience, a church never drifts toward simplicity. A church never drifts toward focus. A church always drifts toward busyness and a lack of focus. And intentional pastors know that they've got to protect the church from busyness, because if we expect people to be making disciples and going out into the world to make an impact on the world, then we've got to make sure that they're not expected to be at the church building 7 days a week. Intentional pastors protect the church from busyness. The 8th habit of a highly intentional pastor is that they make time for deep sermon work. An intentional pastor cannot help but see the church from a 30,000-foot view, to see the big picture, because they need to, they have to. But they also know that when it comes to the sermon, it's one of the most important things that they do. It's an opportunity to proclaim the word of God, to teach people what it looks like to obey Jesus. It's an opportunity to continue to push the vision that God has given your church into the future. Intentional pastors know that this Sunday could be the first and only Sunday someone comes to church, and they want to make sure that they do their best to make sure they present the gospel in a clear and compelling way every single time. So instead of letting their week drift away and settling for another Saturday night special, intentional pastors devote time to deep sermon work. Number 9, an intentional pastor reads widely. They understand that in this day and time of constant crises, constant confusion, constant debate, they understand the necessity of being someone who reads deeply and reads widely, who understands the necessity of being thoughtful and nuanced in the way they teach and the way they preach, who understands different dynamics that people are dealing with and wrestling with in our day and time, and can speak the gospel to those things. Intentional pastors, they read widely. They read from authors that think like them and authors that don't think like them. They read about subjects they're super interested in, and they read about other subjects that they not sure if they're interested in, but they know that they need to be curious about it because their people are asking about it. Number 10, an intentional pastor talks with a counselor at least periodically. Here's the truth. In ministry, you can take a lot of hits. Your soul can feel squeezed. Sometimes you try to help people and they repay you with insult and ghosting you. It's important for an intentional pastor to be self-aware enough to know that there's blind spots that we have. And we need to go to someone who can speak objectively as a third party and just show us what we're not seeing, help us work through our flawed thinking, help us overcome the lies that we're believing and replace it with truth, and help us to live and lead in an emotionally healthy way. Leadership isn't easy and it can take a toll. So intentional pastors, they make it a point to at least approach a counselor as a maintenance, kind of a soul checkup. Just like you would take your car in for an oil change, you go in and talk to a therapist just to make sure everything's good and to teach you healthy coping skills for when you deal with grief, because ministry is full of grief, full of joy, but man, it's full of grief too. So I'm curious, what would you add? What's a habit that I missed on what it looks like to be an intentional pastor in this day and time, in 2024? What does it look like to be an intentional pastor? What are some things that you're focused on in your own life and in your own leadership? And what's something that you know that you need to focus on that you haven't yet? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to hear from you. And if you're a pastor who knows you need to become more productive and more organized in your work, then go to this video where I talk about the Notion Ministry Dashboard, a resource I created using Notion to create the command center for your ministry. Go right here to become more organized and more productive by checking out the Notion Ministry Dashboard. Go right here. I'll see you there.